What if a king had a secret? Not a secret treasure map or a hidden identity, but a secret about his own body. A secret so bizarre, so strange, that it would not only ruin his life, but bring an entire kingdom to its knees. This is the unbelievable, but true, story of King Ferdinand VII of Spain, a man cursed by his own body, who became one of the cruelest kings in history. You see, Ferdinand's problem wasn't his fault. It was a family problem. For centuries, the royal families of Europe had a very strange habit. They kept marrying their own relatives. Uncles married nieces, cousins married cousins. Now imagine you make a photocopy of a picture. It looks okay, but what if you photocopy the photocopy and then photocopy that one? After a while, the picture gets blurry, warped, and weird, right? Well, that's what happened to Ferdinand's family tree. He was the result of a blurry, broken photocopy. And because of it, his body grew in a way that nature never intended. This isn't just a story about a king. It's about how a secret shame can poison a person's heart and destroy everything they touch. Before we unwrap this forgotten piece of history, if you love uncovering the wild truths of the past, hit that like button and subscribe. And let me know where you're listening from in the comments. It's amazing to think we're all exploring this together. To understand King Ferdinand, you have to picture him as a boy. While other princes were learning to ride horses and fence, Ferdinand was learning a terrible secret. His body was different, extremely different. His most private part was growing in a way that shocked the royal doctors. It was, to put it simply, enormous. And not just big, but bizarrely shaped. One person who supposedly saw it wrote that it was thin at the bottom and giant at the top, like a strange bowling pin. Another said it was long enough to be a walking stick. In a time when people thought smaller and more graceful was better, Ferdinand's body marked him as a freak. Think about how embarrassing that would be. The one thing that was supposed to make him a man, a king, a father, was a source of total humiliation. That secret shame curdled inside him. It turned into anger and suspicion. His father, the king, was weak. His mother, the queen, was having a very public affair with another man. Young Ferdinand learned that you couldn't trust anyone. But his body was his biggest enemy. He started to believe everyone was whispering about him, laughing at him behind their hands.
And this paranoia made him cruel. He became a bully. There's a story that a young servant boy accidentally walked in on the prince while he was changing. He got a glimpse of the royal secret. Did Ferdinand just fire him? No, he had the boy whipped and his entire family kicked out of the city. The message was clear: no one looks upon the king's shame and gets away with it. As Ferdinand got older, one giant problem loomed over him: marriage. A king's number one job was to have a son to be the next king. But how could Ferdinand do that? Doctors wrote secret notes about how difficult and even dangerous it would be. Royal craftsmen were hired in secret to build special equipment. They made specially shaped cushions and pillows, basically a toolkit to make it possible for the king to have a wife without hurting her. On top of that, Ferdinand became obsessed with magic potions. He paid a fortune for weird drinks made of ground-up rhino horn and rare plants, hoping one of them would shrink his body to a normal size. Of course, none of them worked. They were all tricks, but his desperation made him an easy target. In 1802, it was time. Ferdinand was to marry his cousin, Princess Maria Antonia. She was young, beautiful, and excited. She had heard people call Ferdinand the desired one and thought she was marrying her Prince Charming. The wedding was like a fairy tale. The music, the crowds, the golden carriage, everything was perfect. But the fairy tale would end the moment they were alone. On their wedding night, Maria Antonia's ladies-in-waiting were told that special preparations were needed. They brought in the weird cushions and strange tools. Maria Antonia, who knew nothing about the realities of marriage, was confused. She had been taught to be a perfect princess, not how to handle a medical marvel. When Ferdinand finally entered the room and she saw him for the first time, she absolutely lost it. A lady-in-waiting later wrote that the princess started screaming as if she'd seen a ghost. She backed into a corner, pointing and crying, "Monster! Monster!" She had imagined a prince, but what she saw was something that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. What happened next wasn't romantic. It was like a scary, clumsy medical procedure. Doctors had to be called in to calm the princess down and explain what had to be done. Even with the special pillows designed to help, the experience was so terrible for Maria Antonia that she had to be given a strong medicine called laudanum just to get through it. This broke them both. Ferdinand's shame turned into anger at his wife's terror, and Maria Antonia was traumatized. She became addicted to the medicine, using it to escape the horror of being the king's wife. Their attempts to have a baby became a repeating nightmare. The doctors would set up the room, Maria Antonia would be given her medicine, and the awful procedure would be done. As years passed with no baby, Ferdinand grew more desperate and more cruel. He became convinced his wife was trying to not get pregnant. He had special leather straps made to hold her in place. He even consulted with astrologers, trying to time their attempts with the phases of the moon. He was so desperate, he'd believe anything. One mystic told him his body was a sign of divine power, a dragon's rod, and he just needed special rituals to unlock it. Incredibly, Maria Antonia did get pregnant, twice. The whole country celebrated, but both times ended in tragedy. Both pregnancies failed, and Ferdinand's reaction was monstrous. Instead of comforting his suffering wife, he accused her of sabotaging the pregnancy on purpose. He filled her head with such poison that she started to believe she was the one who was cursed. Maria Antonia wasted away. She spent her final months praying for forgiveness for sins she never committed. She died in 1807 at only 21 years old. Officially, she died of a fever. Unofficially, she died of a broken heart and a tortured soul. But the horror wasn't over. Rumors flew that Ferdinand himself had her poisoned so he could find a new wife who could give him a child.
After his wife's death, Ferdinand didn't act sad. He acted relieved. He was already searching for wife number 2. Meanwhile, his personality had become as twisted as his body. He saw people as tools. If a tool was broken, you threw it away. This is when he got involved in a plot to overthrow his own father. But when the plot was discovered, Ferdinand showed his true colors. He immediately betrayed all of his friends, telling his father every detail of the plan to save his own skin. He would use people and then destroy them. It was a pattern he would repeat his entire life. Just a year later, the powerful French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Spain. Ferdinand was captured and sent to a castle in France for 6 years. French doctors, fascinated by the stories, examined him like a science experiment. Their secret reports, found centuries later, confirmed everything. They called his condition a perfect storm of genetic problems. While brave Spanish people were fighting and dying to get their king back, what was Ferdinand doing? He was writing letters from his fancy prison, trying to find another princess willing to marry him and his enormous problem. He cared more about his wedding night than he did about his burning country. When Ferdinand finally returned to Spain in 1814, the people went wild with joy. They threw flowers and wept. They finally had their king back. But Ferdinand's mind was elsewhere. His first priority wasn't to rebuild his broken country. It was to find wife number 2 and try again to have an heir. He even sent agents across Europe to find better, more advanced marital aids. He chose another cousin, Maria Isabel of Portugal. She was 19, hopeful, and completely unprepared for the reality that awaited her. The wedding was a huge spectacle meant to hide the king's desperate secret. But the wedding night was a repeat of the first disaster. The screams that echoed through the palace that night were of pure terror. Servants found blood and broken furniture the next day.
Poor Isabel was never the same. She started to stutter and would flinch with fear whenever Ferdinand came near her. She had horrible nightmares about a monster in her dreams. And Ferdinand? He didn't feel bad for her. He became paranoid, convinced her terror was an insult. He had her mail read and her food tasted for poison, sure she was part of a plot to make fun of him. The pressure for a baby was immense. The royal bedroom became a laboratory of bizarre experiments. He even invited foreign doctors to watch his attempts with Isabel, turning their most private moments into a grotesque medical theater. Isabel was humiliated. She became a living ghost, wandering the halls of her palace prison. Meanwhile, Spain's colonies in America were breaking away, using the king's inability to have a child as proof that he was an unfit ruler. In 1818, after 2 years of this living nightmare, Queen Isabel died. She was only 21. Ferdinand, instead of mourning, became convinced she had been murdered by his enemies. He ordered autopsies and had her ladies-in-waiting arrested. His grief was just another form of his paranoia. But he couldn't wait. Months later, he was already looking for wife number 3. This time it was harder. The story of the cursed Spanish king was famous across Europe. Finally, a poor German princess named Maria Josepha Amalia of Saxony agreed. Her family needed the money. She arrived in 1819, older and better prepared. She came with her own doctors and her own set of special equipment. She treated the marriage not like a romance, but like a science experiment to be solved. For 10 long years, their marriage was a series of scheduled, medically supervised procedures. The queen kept detailed notes like a scientist, but all of her planning couldn't fix the unfixable. Meanwhile, Spain was crumbling. The king was so obsessed with having a baby that he ignored his kingdom as it fell apart. People were starving while he spent a fortune on his private problem.
Then, in 1829, the impossible happened. Maria Josepha was pregnant. The court was overjoyed. Ferdinand was terrified. He hired extra guards and surrounded his wife with doctors, mystics, and priests, paranoid that someone would try to harm the baby. But the pregnancy went wrong. In the 7th month, Maria Josepha went into labor. The delivery was a horror. The baby, a little girl, lived for only a few hours. A few weeks later, the queen died too. Ferdinand completely broke down. He refused to let their bodies be buried, demanding his doctors bring them back to life. For a week, the palace stank of death as the king lost his mind. It seemed like the end of the line. But fate had one last bizarre twist. His advisors, desperate for a stable future, quickly arranged a 4th marriage to a princess named Maria Cristina. But Maria Cristina arrived with a secret of her own. She was already pregnant with another man's child when she arrived in Madrid. The wedding was a joke. Everyone could see she was pregnant, but the king, desperate for an heir at any cost, played along. In 1830, a baby girl, Isabella, was born. Ferdinand finally had his heir, but he knew she wasn't his. Their whole life became a lie. He pretended she was his daughter, and she pretended to respect him. And his paranoia got worse than ever. He conducted midnight raids on his wife's bedroom, searching for imaginary traitors. He drilled peepholes in the walls to spy on her. He made servants taste every single bite of his food, watching them for 30 minutes to see if they dropped dead from poison. His obsession with Isabella's real father was insane. He would stare at the baby for hours, comparing her face to paintings of men his wife used to know. The irony was eating him alive. His greatest success, having an heir, was also his greatest personal failure. He trusted no one. He investigated his own brother. He accused his wife of plotting against him when she was just trying to be a good mother. The palace became a theater of fear, where everyone whispered and nobody dared to look the king in the eye. All this stress and fear took its toll. The king was wasting away. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't eat, and his mind began to crumble. His speeches became wild rants about secret enemies and imaginary plots. He became a ghost in his own palace, haunted by a lifetime of failure and fear.
In 1833, King Ferdinand VII
finally died. The official cause was gout, but everyone knew the truth. He had died of exhaustion, a body and soul completely worn out by his bizarre and tragic life. An autopsy was performed in secret, and it confirmed everything the legends and rumors had whispered for decades. His body was exactly as the horrifying descriptions had claimed. But then also found something else: old scars. Scars that suggested that as a young man, Ferdinand had secretly tried to perform surgery on himself, trying to fix the problem that had caused him so much shame. His desperate attempts had only made things worse. The preserved evidence was locked away, a secret too disturbing for the world to see. Ferdinand's story is a chilling reminder of how a person's most private struggle can become a public catastrophe. His shame turned him into a monster. His 3 dead wives, his questionable daughter, and his ruined country all paid the price for a genetic mistake made centuries before. In the end, Ferdinand the tyrant was as much a victim as he was a villain, trapped in a body that wasn't right and a role he was never fit to play. His secret didn't die with him. It lived on as the curse that brought down an empire.